The chamber was heavy with silence, the kind that prickles on the skin before a storm. Cameras rolled, pens hovered above notepads, and all eyes locked onto the man at the center of the stage, Judge Amul Thapar. His voice sliced through the air, deliberate, sharp, carrying that smug certainty of someone convinced the room belonged to him. He leaned forward, eyebrows arched, tone dripping with authority as he pressed Representative Jasmine Crockett, not with curiosity, but with condescension. "Answer the question directly," he snapped, his words echoing like a gavel striking wood. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some smirked, anticipating her stumble. Others stared, bracing for the moment she might falter under the weight of his performance. Thapar wore that familiar smirk, the look of a man who believed he was untouchable. And then, time seemed to stop. Freeze frame. His eyes locked, her posture unshaken. This wasn't just a congressional exchange. This was theater, a showdown carved into America's long tradition of power and resistance. The narrator's voice cuts in, low, deliberate, cinematic. What you're about to witness isn't just politics. It's a battle for dignity, for identity, for the very soul of justice in America. The tension crackled, thick enough to hold. Crockett sat poised, lips pressed, eyes blazing with a quiet fire. She didn't flinch, didn't fumble. She was waiting, calculating, listening. And the judge, in all his overconfidence, had no idea he had just lit the fuse. The audience beyond those walls, millions scrolling their phones, millions hungry for validation, millions who had been talked down to, ignored, dismissed, they didn't yet know what was coming. They didn't yet know that within moments, arrogance would collide with resilience, and one voice would cut through like lightning. This was no ordinary exchange. This was a test. A trial not of law, but of will. A man cloaked in authority, pitted against a woman forged by struggle. The chamber leaned in, the cameras zoomed close, the entire nation unknowingly braced itself. Judge Amul Thapar was no ordinary figure on that elevated bench. A federal judge appointed with fanfare, celebrated in conservative circles as a sharp legal mind. He carried with him the reputation of a man who didn't just ask questions, he cornered. He pressed, he dominated. His rulings had often been lauded by the right and critiqued by the left. A pattern that painted him as more than just a jurist. He was a political symbol. A vessel for a worldview where authority was absolute and dissent was a nuisance. His presence in that chamber was meant to intimidate, to remind everyone who held the power of the robe. And then, across from him, sat Jasmine Crockett. She wasn't supposed to be there for theatrics. She was there as a congresswoman, a voice for those who had been dismissed too many times. Outspoken, unapologetic, often underestimated. Crockett had carved a reputation of her own. A Texas firebrand unafraid to call out hypocrisy. Unafraid to hold her ground in rooms where silence was often the easier choice. She embodied something deeper. The stubborn dignity of those who refused to be erased. So when their paths crossed, it was never just about a line of questioning. It was never just about decorum. This was a clash written in bold strokes, authority versus authenticity, arrogance versus resilience. A federal judge known for hard blows, meeting a congresswoman whose armor was forged in the fires of her own battles. Millions watching from afar didn't see two individuals sparring. They saw something larger, something symbolic. 4 immigrants who had been silenced at borders. 4 women told to sit down in boardrooms. 4 communities dismissed in courtrooms. This moment wasn't abstract. It was personal. The stakes weren't just political. They were cultural, emotional, generational. Because if Jasmine Crockett could hold her ground here, under the weight of judicial arrogance, then maybe, just maybe, anyone could find the courage to hold their ground, too. And so, as Thapar leaned forward, voice sharpened like a blade, trying to trap her in his rhythm, the air thickened. The audience leaned in. Reporters paused. The room itself seemed to hold its breath. To understand the weight of that smirk on Judge Amul Thapar's face, you have to understand the man behind it. Born of immigrant roots, Thapar carved a meteoric rise through the legal world, a journey that should have symbolized the American dream. But with each step higher, his robe seemed to grow heavier with ideology. He became known not merely as a judge, but as a conservative warrior cloaked in judicial authority. His rulings carried sharp edges, decisions that comforted the powerful while cutting deep into the vulnerable. Supporters hailed him as brilliant, a man unafraid to challenge precedent, to push the boundaries of conservative legal philosophy. Critics, however, saw arrogance masquerading as intellect, a pattern of decisions that tilted the scales not toward balance, but toward exclusion. Thapar relished the theatre of the bench. In questioning, he often used the rhythm of a prosecutor, not the neutrality of a judge. He prided himself on finding weak spots, exploiting hesitation, watching witnesses or lawmakers stumble under his barrage of calculated precision. To many, it was intimidation disguised as inquiry. To Thapar, it was victory. That afternoon, he walked into the chamber convinced he would add another feather to his cap. Another clip, another moment to showcase his intellectual dominance. He believed the script had already been written, a congresswoman cornered, silenced, left fumbling as he controlled the narrative. But here's the irony. The very confidence that made him formidable was the same flaw that left him blind. In his eyes, Crockett was just another obstacle, another easy mark. He had faced down lawyers, professors, even senators, and watched them shrink in real time. Why would this be any different? And yet, arrogance always carries its own curse. The higher the pedestal, the harder the fall. As he straightened his robe and sharpened his words, he couldn't see what millions watching would soon witness, that beneath Crockett's calm exterior burned a defiance strong enough to turn the tables. Thapar thought he was the hunter, circling in with precision. But if he thought Jasmine Crockett would fold like so many before her, he was about to be blindsided. Before Jasmine Crockett ever stepped into that chamber, before the cameras and the headlines, she was a fighter in the trenches of ordinary struggle. A Texas-born attorney who cut her teeth defending the voiceless, she wasn't handed power. She clawed her way toward it, case by case, injustice by injustice. In crowded courtrooms and modest offices, she stood shoulder to shoulder with those who couldn't afford polished lawyers or political connections. Her voice carried not the cadence of privilege but the grit of lived experience. She knew what it meant to be dismissed, talked over, underestimated. And each time it happened, she sharpened her resolve like a blade against stone. When she entered politics, it wasn't with the polish of a career politician. It was raw, it was fiery, it was unapologetic. Some called her unrefined. Others called her too bold, too direct. But for her supporters, for those who had waited far too long for someone to speak without flinching, she was exactly what was needed. Crockett became known for her sharp retorts, her willingness to confront hypocrisy head-on, and her refusal to be boxed in by decorum designed to silence. She didn't just occupy a seat in Congress, she embodied resistance, especially for those who saw themselves erased from America's grand narrative. Her journey was never smooth. She faced political attacks, media scrutiny, and the constant pressure to tone it down, to fit the mold of what a congresswoman should be. But every attempt to quiet her only confirmed why she was there in the first place. She wasn't in Washington to blend in. She was there to stand out, and to stand tall. So when Judge Thapar fixed his gaze on her, he wasn't facing a novice. He was facing a woman who had already survived storms fiercer than his words. A woman whose armor was not the robe of a judge, but the scars of battles fought on behalf of people who had nothing but her voice. And it was this fire, this unshakable defiance, that was about to ignite, right when America needed it most. The chamber's quiet murmur gave way to tension sharp enough to cut. Judge Amul Thapar leaned forward, his tone rising with the weight of authority. His words weren't mere questions. They were traps, crafted with the precision of a man used to watching others stumble. He pressed, repeated, demanded. His voice boomed with the certainty of someone who believed the law, and the moment belonged to him. "Congresswoman," he intoned, "answer the question directly." The command hung heavy, almost daring her to falter. The smirk tugged at his lips again, that familiar look of a man savoring his advantage. Around the room, a few nods of approval broke through, spectators eager for the spectacle of power unchallenged. But Jasmine Crockett did not blink. Her eyes, steady as stone, locked with his. Her hands rested calmly, not clenched, not fidgeting. When she spoke, her voice did not rise to match his. It cut instead, deliberate, clear, precise. "Judge, with all due respect, I will not be cornered into your framing." The words cracked through the chamber like thunder. Reporters' pens scratched faster. Cameras zoomed closer. Thapar's smirk faltered, just slightly, as if he hadn't expected resistance so poised, so unyielding. He tried again, this time sharper. "This is a simple question, Congresswoman. Why won't you just give a straight answer?" She leaned in, not in aggression, but in command. Because justice is never simple when dignity is on trial. and I won't let you reduce it to a soundbite. Gasps rippled. This wasn't just testimony anymore. This was theatre, a duel in real time. Crockett wasn't rattled. She was deliberate, flipping the cadence of the exchange. For every attempt Thapar made to box her in, she pushed back with a blade of clarity that pierced his rehearsed authority. The judge raised his voice, words faster, sharper, as if volume could reclaim control. But with each escalation, it became clearer who was holding the room. Crockett's responses landed like hammer blows, not shouted, but firm, unwavering. Observers whispered. A few shook their heads in disbelief. The spectacle was reversing. The man who expected obedience was growing visibly unsettled, while the woman he tried to corner only grew stronger with each retort. It was the shift no one expected. Power leaking from the robe to the congresswoman who sat defiantly across from him. And with every sentence, Crockett wasn't just defending herself. She was defending everyone who had ever been told to sit down, to be quiet, to stay in their place. Then came the pause. The kind of silence that swallows a room whole. She looked directly at him, unflinching, and delivered a line that left even his supporters stunned. And then, the room went silent, because no one expected her to say that.